Please do not come thinking that you're doing us a favor.
We need to begin to trust ourselves.
The little acts of kindness can make a whole of difference.
I believe that the talents are here, the innovators of tomorrow are here within our youths in Africa, and we just need to be able to support.
My dad, he would say to me in Ekiti,
Somebody who pursues the process, who understands you, the partner, what you need, and is really invested.
From my visits to quite a number of universities, I know that a lot is being done within the Nigerian and African space, but it is not there outside.
Unfortunately, universities in Africa do not always have such a direct access to funding.
But our focus is it must be equitable and mutually beneficial.
Exactly. So how can we collaborate with African institutions?
Identify really not just what you will do for us, but what we can do for you.
This is TINE Africa Podcast. The new sound of international education in Africa.
Hello again, and welcome to another episode of TINE Africa Podcast. This is where we talk about everything that has to do with international education in the continent of Africa. And today I am so delighted to have my seniors, my elders in the industry, and of course in the entire education sector of Africa in the studio with us today. And today we're looking at a very important topic, a very important topic to not just me, but to young Africans, and of course to the entire continent, basically around African universities, the kind of collaborations that exist, and as well as how these collaboration or collaborative practices is impacting the development of people that are going to these universities to study, but also the nation where these institutions exist. So today we will be looking at making partnership work between home universities and universities overseas. Of course, it doesn't even have to be like international, beyond Africa kind of collaboration, but also collaboration within Africa and within these respective countries. My name is Louis Adekola, and I'm the host of this podcast. So let's get started, and I'm just going to introduce you straight on to my guests on this episode. I am so honored to be sitting right next to the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academics and Research at the University of Lagos, Professor Bola Oboh.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, we'll say good afternoon, good morning, good evening.
Wherever you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Excellent. And we also have with us today amazing lecturer and the Dean, School of Media and Communications at the Pan-Atlantic University, Dr. Ikechukwu Obiaya.
Hello, good to be here.
Good to have you here as well. So, I started by saying my elders, I don't want to say senior colleagues, because if there's any other word to call senior colleagues, I would use that right now. And I find myself to be highly privileged to just be sitting here and talking to you. So let's start with a little icebreaker, just talking about yourself. So I'd like you to start by telling us more about yourself, what you do, and the journey that you've had to get into where you are today. Because a lot of people aspire to be at your level, and we would want them to hear from you and learn about the journey that has brought you here. So let's start with you, Prof.
Okay, my journey. I think secondary school days, I went to Queen's School, Ibadan.
Okay.
Wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I was a science student. At that time, my father was quite liberal. He also being an academic to an extent, and make up your mind. So I was thinking I would do things like either geography. At that age, I really loved to travel a lot. But because of one or two things, I couldn't do geography, even though that was where I had my best results at the secondary school level.
Yeah.
And then I went into biology. And my father being an agriculturist, it was like, oh, why not agric? And I said, no, I wanted to do the basics in biology. Then he said, why not medicine? And I said, as a young kid, I was very sick. So I've been in and out of hospitals and I never liked the smell of hospitals. So that was totally out of my way. And so as I went on, I think I got interested in genetics. And so that just opened my mind, and I just made up my mind that I would have to dig deeper after my first degree, and so and to be able to apply genetics. And so I went into plant science, plant breeding, quantitative genetics for my master's and my PhD. And I had all my degrees at the University of Ife, now called Obafemi Awolowo University. After that, I really knew I wasn't cut out. I was cut out more for research. So I got a job with the then Nigerian Institute for Oil Palm Research in Benin City, and then got married. My husband came to Lagos, so I transferred to the University of Lagos as a lecturer and a researcher. And I think I rose through the ranks, became a professor. And through dinks of hard work, spent some time in various positions. I managed the University of Lagos Consult for some time, was the Director of Research Management for some time, and from there became the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academics and Research. Not a very easy role, but I think it's any hardworking person can cope with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Like I said, it's very important to also spend some time to listen to stories like yours, because it's very easy for people to say, oh, DVC, I see them around, I'm impressed by them, I want to be like that person. But sometimes we forget that there's a process that actually have brought people to that point. So hopefully some younger people can listen to yours and, be inspired by that.
Be motivated.
Exactly. So what about you, Professor Obiaya? Well, I'm already leading you to Professor.
Don't even into that one. We will welcome it. No, great. Well, my journey was not as straightforward as Prof's here, because I did not go immediately into academics.
Okay.
Well, she mentioned Benin City, so that gives me a good hook. I'm born, bred and buttered, as I like to say,
in Benin.
Yes, I attended primary school, secondary school, and then university in Benin as well. Wow. That's why I say bred.
Wow.
Okay. Buttered. In Benin. Well, the thing is, I think I had a similar experience with Prof in those early years, which I think is common to young people.
Yeah.
You don't know what you want to do. So my classmates at the time were putting in for law, and so I said, well, fine, I'll do law. My poor father had to travel with me all the way to Nsukka then to check, or to Enugu rather, to check the results for JAM. So on the way back, which I did badly in, on the way back, this was after checking the JAM results, he suggested to me, why don't you do English?
Oh.
And I said yes. That's what I studied eventually. I got into the University of Benin, studied English, and years later, I did a master's also in English. But like I said, my journey was not so straightforward, because I went into other aspects of the media before eventually going back to do a master's and subsequently the PhD. My PhD is actually in film.
Film?
Yes. I studied something to do with our film industry. This was much later.
Mm.
At the same time that I joined the Pan-Atlantic University, where I've been now for about 17 years.
Wow.
Yes, about 17 years in the School of Media and Communication. So it was on that basis, okay, well, I guess it didn't find anybody bad enough to do the job. So I ended up as the dean there. I must say, anybody who's striving for the position has to also realize that it's a lot of work.
Yes.
It's a lot of work. People think it's perhaps just a position, but it's not. It's just a title.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. And sometimes really, I wish somebody would come and take it over. It is a lot of work. But truly, it puts you in a position to do a lot of useful things.
Yes.
Really. That I think is what I would say.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And 17 years is a long time. And I'm just here sitting and I'm just really happy that I get to hear this and for other people to also hear. And yes, I was going to come back to you and say, Prof, how long have you been?
I've been in UNILAG for 30 years. I was in the Nigerian Institute for Oil Palm Research for some time also before I transferred to Lagos. So
Wow.
yeah, I've been in the research space for quite some time.
That's a little less than the entire life I've lived. Well, I mean, my journey was very interesting. I wanted to study when I was younger. When I was in secondary school, I wanted to go into dance. I had my life planned. I was going to go into art class, and then from there, I wanted to study creative arts or performing arts, and then leave that, and then go to Alvin Ailey in New York. I was going to study dance, and then from there, move to Broadway. Perfect plan. But my dad, he would say to me in Ekiti, meaning that I understand very well. None of my children would be a dancer or like a dancing non-entity.
I was going to ask you that because I know that it's a problem with steel cars.
Yeah.
That there's that mentality that only layabouts and dropouts go into the space of that
space.
Of course, luckily that's changing when we see how successful the creative industries are today. But it still lingers. So when you say you're going to dance, I was thinking to myself, no, what has happened?
It didn't eventually happen. I didn't even go to art class. Just like when you were talking about your dad saying he being an agriculturist that you should. My dad was like, he was into insurance at the time, and it's like, go to commercial class. And my school had said, you had good junior WAEC, go to science class. So I was torn between not only the devil, the deep blue sea, there was one other one that was also there. But eventually I went to commercial class. And when I was getting to university, I was thinking that I was going to study business or banking or accounting. And then we checked my results. Of course, at the time, it was being pasted on the wall. And then I saw my name. Well, I didn't see my name in any of those. And then someone said, check Edu. Check Edu. And then I went and checked the education. And then I saw my name under educational management. At the time, I never even knew there was a course like that. And I saw my name there. I was like, what is going on? I called my dad and I said, my name is out, educational management. And he said, okay, so nice. What course? I said, but I just said it, educational management. I was like, is that a course? I eventually did that, and I'm very grateful that, he also supported. Yes. Yeah, I'm very grateful that I did, because now I find myself in that education sector, and I'm grateful that I'm able to make the kind of contributions that I'm making now, from here. So now talking about contributions, and I know you do a lot. You bring a lot of that to, by the way, I'm wearing a UNILAG cufflinks, and I'm using a Pan-Atlantic pen, so a balanced conversation here. In terms of contributions, that you've brought into the institutions that you work with, I know there's a lot of things that you do in terms of getting partnerships sorted from different universities, either locally, regionally, or internationally. How important are these kind of collaborations to the work that you do in African institutions? I'll start with you again, Prof.
Okay. For us in UNILAG, I would say it's been a journey, and collaborations in terms of our research, I think maybe just became a serious priority maybe in the last 10 years. Or a little over. We started with the Research Management Office, and we started with our international office. Yeah. And it's really grown. And we find that we have quite a lot of collaborations. We belong to quite a number of networks. It has helped our research space.
Yes.
It's helped the visibility for our young researchers. It's helped our research funding space, capacity building. So it's quite a wide thing. Initially, most of the collaborations were towards the north, but we find that with the birth of things like ARUA in 2015, the Africa Research Universities Alliance, on which we are one of the founding members, the collaboration within African universities in that network deepened, and it also opened our eyes to see we need to collaborate even within Nigeria and also collaborate in the region. When I say the region, the West African region.
Yes.
And then we started looking at our strategies, our policies in those areas, and we have been able to deepen that. And I would say the network has grown. ARUA has grown. We collaborated with ourselves. We now have ARUA EU, Africa EU group, which is ARUA and some EU Guild universities. And so things are growing, and collaborations are growing. ARUA is able to do what you say, a monitoring and evaluation. And so they bring the results out, and we see where we started from, and where even all those universities, and we are gradually seeing the improvements in that. A lot of staff and student exchanges, both within the African continent, and also some with our EU partners, and also some who are not even within the EU guilds that we partner with. Erasmus, we see our students. We have also the intra-African mobility. So it's quite a wide space, which is good for us. But our focus is it must be equitable and mutually beneficial.
Exactly.
So it's not supposed to be one-sided. And so we also have them coming, and we also go. Like before, where we had just the idea of just wanting to go abroad. No, it's mutually beneficial. So they come in, they spend some time, we go there, we spend some time. And so,
That's really good. And I love how you've touched on, the importance of the collaborative relationships that you have with institutions locally, regional, in the region and beyond, and also in terms of the guiding principle of it being mutually beneficial, being collaborative of some sort. Everybody takes a piece of the pie. So thank you very much, Ma, for sharing that. I want to ask you, sir, about the basic kind of expectations that African institutions have. What do you think are like basic expectations that institutions like yours have when you're going into sort of maybe signing MOUs or building alliances or agreements with institutions?
I would latch onto something that Prof said already, which is that at the beginning, you will see that a lot of times we're thinking of our going there to do things and so on and so forth. But I would like to add this from our perspective, that has changed now. It's not so much that. We're trying to see, really, it has to be mutually beneficial. One, certainly, we would like to collaborate in things of research. Unfortunately, universities in Africa do not always have such a direct access to funding. And so that is also something we look for. We are not going cap in hand, but it means in order to access some of this funding for research, you have to partner. Okay, so many times when we enter into these relationships, it's that we're also looking for research funding. And the third thing, sharing of expertise.
True.
Because yes, you do have some very well-established universities who have done a lot in certain areas, and we want to benefit from that as well. And also, student and staff exchanges. These are things, But I like very much what Prof said. It has to be mutually beneficial.
Absolutely.
At some stage, we were signing many of these MOUs. But I think we got to a point where we realized, hey, look, we have so many of these things signed, but nothing is happening with them. So it was a point at which there was that need to change strategy. Before signing anything, let us identify what exactly we are going to be doing together. And it has to be that it's mutually beneficial. Because if I am benefiting, you're not benefiting. At some point in time, the relationship will die because you won't pursue it.
Yes.
But if both parties are benefiting,
Yeah.
and certainly there's a greater
Yeah.
desire to keep it
Exactly.
going, to keep it
And to build on it.
and to build on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is very important. I like I mentioned just before we started recording, I used to work in a state university in Nigeria, and I used to lead the advancement team. And one of the things I was very intentional about was building collaboration within, because of context for me. I feel like we had gotten to a point in the institution that the MOUs had just become like list on the Vice Chancellors, so that when the Vice Chancellor is making a speech, he can read out all these names and these institutions, but it wasn't transferring into anything. So I started looking within and like, how can we collaborate with African institutions? And I was talking about several other people that I met through the kind of work that we started to do. And I think it's very, very important that we pay attention to this. I want to ask though, you've mentioned the issue of funding, which is one challenge though, but also leads into the like the conversation starter, with maybe research when you're building this kind of relationship. What are the challenges that you think that exist when building relationships between African institutions and universities overseas?
Like he said, I think the major challenge is actually why we are building most of those relationships, to be able to do good research. But the research must be targeted, which we seriously talk about now at national or African challenges.
Yeah.
And for most of the networks we have now, we look at the AU 2063 agenda, apart from the SDG
Yes.
2030. So we look at that. And when we are working with our global partners, we also look at the fact that there are some common problems globally. If we talk of climate
change.
if we talk of what the pandemic showed
Yes.
us, so when we look at multi-mobility,
Yes.
non-communicable diseases,
Or gender
So,
disparity. those
and then
things.
gender inclusion and
Yeah.
diversity,
Yeah.
so migration and mobilities.
Yes.
So those are some of the things we have focused on. Those are some of the things Arua did, and with Arua we were able to, as a body, seek funding that was utilized to build networks within the African universities and do research in some of these areas. But the major challenge, I would say, is funding. Our partners in the North are ready to work with us. The funds are there. They have the funds. We don't have much funds.
Yeah.
Well, what I will say is that the AU, ECOWAS, because if you go to East Africa, the East African network of the countries in East Africa have regular fundings for their universities. So ECOWAS should look into that. How do they fund research that will benefit the region?
True.
And be able to have calls and put money to that.
Yeah.
Our Nigerian government is trying through TED Fund. We will encourage them to do more. World Bank established quite a number of centers and funded them within the African space, and Nigeria benefited. There's a South African Research Foundation, which we have to partner with our colleagues in South Africa. And we are able to also get such grants. But we need to have more of such funding bodies within the African continent.
Exactly.
Multinationals, companies, industries need to begin to look at the research aspect of their work, and how they can support universities to solve those problems. I know of industries within the Nigerian space who needed to solve some problems and took it abroad, while it could be done here. Do you understand? So we need to begin to trust ourselves to be able to do this. And with the kind of youth population we have, and what I see them do, even those that are not in the tech space within the University of Lagos, I believe that the talents are here. The innovators of tomorrow are here within our youths in Africa.
Yeah.
And we just need to be able to support,
to
be able to sort out our problems.
Let me just latch a little bit.
Yes,
onto it,
please.
'cause I was thinking exactly that. Prof is talking about the AU and so on, bring and different companies supporting research in our universities.
Yeah.
But really, I think it's important to stress that they need to trust the university,
The institutions.
the people here. Because many times, as she has said, when people have projects, what do? They go outside the country.
Yeah.
Whereas there are people here
Yeah.
who are being sought out. Like people elsewhere.
Yeah.
But no,
That's the dichotomy that exists, isn't it?
they seek us out here, but our own people, they want somebody to do something and then they're broadcasting a call outside the country.
Yeah.
Whereas that funding, really, a lot more can be done here. And I think it's a very important point.
Yes.
There has to be more of that support.
Thank you very much for saying that. I think one very important thing that Prof had mentioned earlier about was when you talked about the agenda, the AU Agenda 2063, and how that is complementary to the SDGs. I know there's a lot of conversations that we've always had in SDGs. Before the SDGs was formed, the MDGs, the transition from MDGs to the SDGs, right? There was a time just before that, 2015, that they needed youth voices and stuff, and some of us were selected to ask what are the needs of young people. I was much younger because that's now 10 years ago. It was 2014, and we were involved in that process of contributing to it. And I'm very impressed that is mainstream even more than the MDGs. People know more about the SDGs. But I think it's important to also emphasize the Agenda 2063 that is more African. It's easier to contextualize those ones when we're having conversations, and it also impacts the kind of requests that African institutions then make from the institution you're collaborating with. So Dr. Obiaya, I want to ask you a question regarding this kind of requests that the institutions make when you're building collaboration. How do you find that balance? Especially when you're collaborating with the North, right? How does African universities find the balance between the need to get those collaboration and the revenue that comes from it, or funding support that comes from it, and the immediate goal of the society that the institution is trying to address? How do you find that balance in terms of ethics, in terms of progress, if I may say?
Well, I think usually a lot of care needs to be taken. However, when we as universities enter into such agreements, I think our first concerns usually are our own people, our students.
Yes.
Okay, and I think that's what drives things. We are concerned about putting a structure in place that will benefit our students. And I think that is always a clear guiding line. So whatever else is coming in that doesn't fit in with that, because clearly you reject it. But I don't, at least personally, I haven't had too much experience in terms of people bringing in or suggesting things that you say, I don't know, this is clearly for us. No, actually, usually these approaches, these encounters to discuss are usually very open.
Yeah.
So it's about, we are interested in collaborating with you. What can we do together?
Yeah.
That tends to be the approach.
Yes.
Then it's a discussion thing. So, the last ones we've had, for instance, is that the potential partners come and say, well, what do you have? This is what we have.
What are you bringing on?
What are you
table?
bringing on the
Yes.
table? How can we match?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so what we do is we identify, okay, we have this, this, and that. You have this, this, and that. Okay, on this point, we can collaborate.
Yeah.
At this other point, we can do this together. We have this need. Can you meet this for us? And so on and so forth.
Okay.
That really tends to be the approach.
Yeah.
And of course, in this kind of way, you have a control on well, like you say, the ethics. Clearly, if you have two universities whose, how should I put it, whose approach to things differs, the ideology,
Ideologies, yes.
ideology differs, such conversations will never happen. Because clearly already you say, no, we cannot go with these guys. We see what they're doing. It doesn't fit what we want to do at all.
Thank you for saying that. There was something that you actually said in passing, you didn't like drill into, but it formed, like a quote around everything you say, which is about branding. It's how that university is already presented in the first instance. Right. Anybody coming to you knows you for who you are, and it sort of forms how they present whatever they want to present to you. And I think that's one thing that is important for university to invest in institutional branding and presentation. And Prof, you were talking about communication. So now, talking about communication and, new age technology, how do you think that technology or digital platforms can support the partnership endeavors of African institutions?
Before we started this conversation, we talked a lot about communication, how the African universities, especially sub-Saharan African universities, are doing quite a lot.
Yes.
But it's not visible to the...
It's not amplified.
It's not amplified to the outside world. And I talked about not being able to change, especially for the older ones, from that analog way of doing things to the digital platforms. And I think it is something we all need to work on.
Absolutely.
And I think in working on it, also, like I said, we have a teeming youth population in all these universities. Right. They are the ones, like Doctor said when we were having the charts, they are the ones to be used to do all this. Yeah. It's quite expensive, the initial layout, but that is where people will see what a lot of the universities are doing. Yeah. From my visits to quite a number of universities, I know that a lot is being done within the Nigerian and African space, but it is not there outside for people to really know that if I need this, I can go to this university and I can get it done for me.
Exactly.
And that has to go out.
Yes.
That this is what we do, this is what we're about, and these are our achievements over the years. We need to amplify it through all the various platforms
that exist.
Yeah, because the youths control those platforms. So let your students, anybody within the space, let them be in charge and help you on a regular basis.
Yes.
Bring out those contents so that people will say, oh, this is happening there.
Yeah.
I need to be there. Oh, I need to get in touch with them. We can work on this together. Yeah. I just told you we are just rounding up our international week, and our partners from Finland and Sweden were really impressed because we had a energy innovation challenge. So there was a hackathon, and universities in the Southwest, 6 universities in the Southwest eventually participated. So we had about 13 groups pitch their ideas and all that. You'll be surprised. Some were producing energy from the footsteps of people within a crowded space. Like you are in a shopping mall, and then some picked energy from noise, like in a marketplace, and you could see bulbs light up and things and all that. Wow. So the youth, they have it.
That is
Do you understand? So those are innovations, and it's they that run, whether we like it or not. They have all the ideas, and they run all these networks.
Yes.
They are the ones that people listen to. So you need to engage them to be able to show what we do in our spaces.
Yeah,
thank you. That's the way to go, actually.
Thank you very much.
Just add a small story here.
Please.
There was some young people in our university who put into a competition recently and built this rover thing. And speaking about the experience afterwards, the young man said that they had reached out. There was some opportunity with NASA for different teams to build, young people to build things with NASA competition. They reached out because they wanted to be a part of that. And the response was that, sorry, you can't, because we don't have agreement with you. Exactly. So you see this thing of collaborations.
Yes.
This is the kind of access we can provide.
Exactly.
Because otherwise, if people miss out on opportunities, not that they're not capable, but just that they do not have access.
Yes. And it's always very, very important to recognize and appreciate that the resources that are available to you. And by resources, I mean, in my head, human resources. The students.
They are greatest resource.
They are the largest resource.
They are.
We have a student population of about full-time, part-time, almost 60,000.
60,000.
So you can imagine
that's a lot.
if you're able to solve that. Yeah.
When I was working in the university that I used to work with, one of the things that I did that I was very proud of was establishing what I call the student internship program. And I would ask students to submit applications. I'd graduated from the same university, by the way, and I was just like 3 or 4 years, out of school. And I would ask them to submit their CVs. I would take them through interviews, even though I might end up taking all of them. But I wanted them to go through that process so they feel like, oh, I've applied for something before, I've done interview before, and all of that. And then eventually we pick them. Maybe some of them. There's some that we didn't eventually take into the work. Of course, we need to know we're getting what we want from them. And then they would, serve as content developers or content managers, social media coordinators. Some of them would go and take like student feedback and record into a video. And this became a thing. The university was talking about it. I had to write an article for CASE, the Council for Advancement and Support of Education. I wrote an article for Loughborough Uni that is still there now, on their fundraising in Africa page, and somebody did a dissertation on what we were doing in the office, because it was creating that kind of result. People didn't know about the university for a long time, but now they're reading about the university, they are seeing pictures. Because at the end of the day, students are talking about your uni.
Oh yeah.
They will talk about it. The graduates will talk about your uni. You need to be able to harness and, be in that conversation of what they're saying so that you can build on that capacity, So now, I know you've touched on this a little in the course of the conversation, but is there one success story that you would like to share about your institution's collaboration? Maybe one from maybe Nigerian or African institution, and then maybe one from an international, like beyond Africa, maybe UK, US, Canada, also, so that we can have a bit of a balance angle to this. I'd like to hear maybe one success story of how partnership is helping your institutions in terms of teaching, learning, and or research. Anyone can go first.
Okay. I will say in terms of internship, well, there are a lot of experiences with capacity building and all that. We have some colleagues who teach online from Europe and from within Africa in some of our courses already, and also industry partners. But from our internships, especially since we latched onto the Erasmus program, I think it's been an eye-opener for our students. They compete to go. It's normally few numbers. And I will say the success story of a young girl who had an internship in Turkey. For a semester. She came back with all A's from Turkey, and she felt that exposure. She said it just turned everything around for her to know that once opportunities exist, I must latch onto it and see whether I qualify or not. I shouldn't just sit at the back and say,
yes,
it's not possible.
Yes.
And so she joined the Investment Society, and then the World Bank came looking for interns, and she applied. She was coached. She went for internship in her 300 level semester break, and then she came back with a letter of offer. When you graduate, join us as a junior analyst.
Wow.
As I speak to you, she's in Washington. She's finished her degree just this August, and she's already working.
What a journey.
So you can see the journey.
Yeah.
And there are two of them actually who got it, but one didn't have that Erasmus something. And so I called together those who had had experiences going on internships, either within the African space. And you find some of those within the African space saying they are doing remote jobs even while they are still in school. Their eyes have been opened to seeing a lot of. So the students have actually been transformed. And we find that whether you are in law, whether you are in engineering, a lot of them come together within the fintech and innovation space to see things, problems they can solve, who they can work for, and we are building a group of young students now who want to run their own business, who want to be on their own, dictate the time, young entrepreneurs, and also employers of labor. And I think that is one of the things some of these partnerships have brought about.
Thank you for sharing that. And I love you probably have heard me like say this a few times in the course of the conversation, the idea of processes, like journeys that people have, because it's easy for people to look at me and like see my posts online and like, oh, this person has got it easy, like it's fine for them and stuff. But I remember a time that I would always like trek from wherever I was staying in Mushin, trek over to the National Theatre to go and rehearse dance and all of that. And I'm not in dance now, I'm not doing that. But for me, every step is important. Every step. I had worked as a customer care agent at a place where I didn't like. I worked there for a few months. I had an issue with my left hair, and now I'm doing this podcast, and I'm remembering some of those lessons. Do not look slouched on the chair, keep smiling, all of those things. So for me, journeys and processes are very important.
Very.
So you sharing that journey of that lady from one step to the other, and that has brought them to Washington, to working in a place like the World Bank. I think it's really amazing. So, sir, anything?
Yes, what I will focus on really is the importance of having in any collaboration someone who has your back. Because we had this collaboration with a university in the UK in which our students, our PhD students would go there to spend a few weeks. It was a fantastic thing. They would learn, they had classes and so on. But unlike what we had done with some other universities in the past, this particular relationship worked. It was with the University of Westminster. I'm sorry, not Westminster. The Birmingham City University. Okay. We had that relationship with Birmingham City University. And that relationship worked because there was someone in the system who was in charge of that, who really went all out to make sure not only that the process worked, but that our students were welcome. Such that, for instance, they arrived there due to various mishaps, whatever. They arrived there late at about 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. But would you believe that this person left her house at that time, brought them warm food, brought them extra blankets, just really to make them welcome.
Yeah.
So it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think that I would like to stress that in any of these kind of collaborations, it is important that there be a process to ensure that people would really feel welcome. Somebody who pursues the process, who understands you, the partner, what you need and is really invested in it.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, these relationships will
They don't.
Yeah.
They
it
don't.
won't work.
They break them.
So I think that that's a very key thing. If anybody's planning to go into a relationship, there must be at least some level of closeness or friendship with somebody. Otherwise, at some point it will break up.
Yeah.
Yes.
So for us, that was a real success story because other ones we had done hadn't worked so well.
Yeah. I like what you said, sir, and really, how little acts of kindness can make a difference.
Right.
I studied abroad, and one of the experiences that I will never forget was how the president of his name is Tunde, the president of the Sussex Nigeria Society, had brought me a plate of jollof. And on my first day on campus, like the first day I arrived in Brighton, he brought me a plate of jollof with chicken. And it felt like, you've left home, but we're here for you. Like, that was how I interpreted it. And that really just made a difference that, I've left home, but I've got people here.
Yeah.
So that also translates into this. So the little acts of kindness can make a whole of difference. Now, to wrap up, I'm going to ask just one question. I'll ask you to please say something about it. It's very usual. Usually we see institutions come in with different offerings and all of that. if you're to advise one international university reaching out to your university, what would be your advice for them in terms of approach, in terms of offering?
The advice to the
international institution making that move to come to Unilag, what should they come with? What should be in their head when they're thinking of approaching Unilag and PAU?
If I may, I would say please do not come thinking that you're doing us a favor.
Okay.
Identify really not just what you will do for us, but what we can do for you.
Yeah.
I'm going back to what Prof said earlier. If the relationship is not mutually beneficial, it'll falter.
Yeah.
So I think that it's always important, come thinking that I am not just coming to give these guys something, but I'm also going to benefit from it. And I think it's important to first of all identify what exactly am I going to gain and what am I going to be giving them. Once there's that meeting point, the relationship will work.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. I think it's just similar to what he has said, because we receive a lot of letters like that from universities. And once I read through it and they're just telling me I'm University X, I'm on the ranking, you want to partner with me, nothing happens. You want to partner with Unilag, nothing happens. It's just
as simple as that.
Kept away. But if you come and you say what you have seen in us and the area, you have to be specific.
Yeah.
In what area do you want to partner? Are you looking at capacity building? Are you looking at
student exchange?
Staff and student exchange? Are you looking at research collaborations, applying for research plans together? And then you must also go further and identify the area and tell us how you feel in that area we have excelled.
Yes.
And then a conversation can start.
Yes.
If I say that, then the conversation starts. But if it's just, I want to partner with you for, like you said, signing all the MOUs, he also said that.
Yeah.
And then having a long list of MOUs. I think most of our universities, at least within the Nigerian space, I think most of us have passed that stage now.
Yes.
And we really want to know, if we are coming, what are you bringing on and what can we offer you? So that a good discussion can start, and then that way it becomes sustainable. And then you identify, is it a particular department you want to work with?
Yes.
Is it a particular faculty in some areas? Is it going to be
a project?
Is it a project that you want to do and you need an African partner, and you find that you have some colleagues and you mention them you have found online, either in the Scopus space, in the Google Scholar space, that are really doing well in that? Then a discussion will start.
Thank you both. That was just really amazing, because again, for me, when you talk about recognizing what we have to offer you and being specific, and then reflecting or doing your research about what we have, where we stand on the ranking, on in terms of projects that we've done, the success stories that we have, I think that is really important. Again, just reminded me of my dissertation when I did my master's in, by the way, I did a master's at Unilag. I did a master's in comparative education at Unilag, and my master's in international education at Sussex. My dissertation was on decolonization of higher education.
Okay.
So all of these are things that I was engaging with, in terms of value that exists within the higher education sector in Africa. And this has to be recognized. So if any institution is coming to African universities to make an offering, also understand that these universities exist with so much value. And I appreciate that when you're starting that conversation. Thank you so much for such a great conversation today. I've really enjoyed talking to you. When I said my elders, I knew what I was saying.
Although you're making us sound like dinosaurs.
I didn't say that, but you're welcome to say it, sir. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing so much knowledge with us today. I'm so grateful to have you here.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having us too.
Great. All right, guys. So thank you for, I want to say thank you to you as well for being patient with us and for listening and watching till this time. This has been a very fantastic conversation that I've had with Professor Bola Oboh, who is the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Academics and Research at the University of Lagos, as well as Dr. Ikechukwu Obiaya, who is the Dean of School of Media and Communications at the Pan-Atlantic University. And we've had such an amazing conversation about making partnership works within African institutions, between home universities and universities overseas, but also looking at the value that African universities have and the power of collaborating within before collaborating beyond. Also in terms of how to make MOUs not just something on paper, but really something that really create value for both parties. And I hope that you've enjoyed this episode as we have enjoyed having this conversation. If you have, please do remember to like, to share, to comment, and to subscribe to this channel so that you can watch this and other episodes of our podcast. As also, we want to hear from you, really, to get a feedback from you on what kind of conversation you'd like us to have and how we can make this podcast so much better. This is TINE Africa Podcast. My name is Louis Adekola, and this is the new sound of international education in Africa.